Hi.
It had been an ordinary Friday evening, or at least that's what I had thought before everything changed. The sky outside was painted in muted shades of blue and orange, the kind of sunset that should have made everything feel peaceful. But my heart was already heavy with an unexplainable weight, something I couldn't quite shake all day. I had spent hours at work, pretending to focus on presentations, numbers, deadlines, and all the usual corporate grind, but my thoughts kept drifting to Lily, my wife. She had been different lately, more distant, more distracted. It was subtle at first, nothing overt, just the small things. She was always busy on her phone when I got home, her eyes elsewhere during dinner, or lost in thought when we spoke. But the thing that truly began to gnaw at me was how distant we had grown, even in the most mundane of moments. We had always been so connected, sharing every little detail of our days. She would tell me about the annoying customers at the coffee shop she worked at, and I would listen, nodding, offering my empathy. I'd tell her about my grueling meetings and the frustrations of work, and she'd offer comforting words. Over the past few weeks, though, she had become more distant, more absorbed in her own world. Her laughter no longer reached her eyes the way it used to, and her smile didn't seem as genuine. I had to admit that part of me had already suspected something wasn't right. It wasn't just the silence or the subtle coldness that had crept into our home. It was the way she had suggested that we take a break a few months ago, something I had brushed off as a passing thought, a way to ease some of the pressure we had both been feeling in our busy lives. But then, that suggestion had turned into something else, something far more complicated. I had never imagined she would betray me. I couldn't have even fathomed it. Lily, my sweet, caring wife, who had always been so affectionate, so loyal, so strong, suddenly seemed like a stranger to me. But tonight, that stranger was standing in front of me, and the truth would be revealed in a way I could never have anticipated. The moment came after dinner, after we had spent a quiet hour in the living room, both of us pretending to be absorbed in our own distractions. Lily had been unusually quiet, and I had been trying to work up the courage to ask her what was wrong, to confront her about the distance I had sensed between us. But the words never came. It was as if I knew the answer already, but I wasn't ready to hear it. She finally spoke, her voice soft but firm. "James, we need to talk." I froze. It wasn't just the words, it was the way she said them. It was the finality in her tone, the same way someone would speak before making an irreversible decision. I felt my stomach drop, my heart pounding. "What's going on, Lily?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. But she didn't answer right away. Instead, she sat down across from me, her eyes focused on something beyond me. "I've been thinking a lot," she started, "about us, about our relationship." I nodded, unsure of what to say. I had been thinking a lot too, but I didn't want to lead her. I needed her to tell me, to open up. "I know things haven't been perfect lately," she continued, her gaze finally meeting mine. "But I want you to understand that this isn't something I did to hurt you, not exactly." I felt a chill in the air. What did she mean by that? My chest tightened. "Lily, what are you talking about?" She paused for a moment before speaking again. "I've been seeing someone else, James." The words hung in the air between us like a bomb waiting to explode. I couldn't breathe. "What?" My voice cracked. "What do you mean, someone else?" She took a deep breath, clearly struggling with the weight of her confession. "I've been having an affair. I'm sorry, but I've been seeing someone for the past few months. It started as something casual, but it turned into more." I couldn't move. The ground beneath me felt like it was slipping away. I wanted to scream, to lash out, but the words wouldn't come. The room was spinning. "How long, Lily? How long has this been going on?" "3 months, she replied softly. "Maybe a little longer." I was shaking now, my whole body trembling. "How could you do this to me?" I demanded, my voice low and hoarse. "How could you?" She held up her hand, her face pale. "I didn't want to hurt you. I never meant for things to get this far, but I couldn't keep pretending. I needed more." But I could barely hear her words through the blood rushing in my ears. "Needed more? What are you talking about?" She exhaled sharply. "James, I suggested we try an open relationship months ago. You didn't want to. You said it was against your values, and I respected that, I really did. But I couldn't help how I felt. I didn't want to lose you, but I also didn't want to lose myself. I felt the world shatter around me. She had suggested an open relationship? She had asked for this? So this was my fault? My voice was quiet, barely a whisper. You're saying I pushed you to this? That it's my fault that you cheated? Her eyes softened, but there was something cold in them that made my blood run cold. No, James, that's not what I'm saying. I needed more affection, more attention, more connection. And you weren't giving it to me. I tried. I really tried to make things work. But I didn't know how else to fix it. So I made a choice. It wasn't about you not being enough. It was about me being lost. I felt something break inside me, deep in the pit of my stomach. She wasn't even sorry. She was justifying it. She wasn't asking for forgiveness. She was explaining her actions as if they made sense. My entire life felt like it had been turned upside down. I don't believe this, I muttered, my voice shaking. You can't just do this to me, Lily. You can't just cheat and expect me to understand because you suggested an open relationship. She stared at me, her lips pressed tightly together. I thought it was what we both wanted, she said quietly. But I see now that I was wrong. Wrong? I repeated bitterly. You think you were wrong? This is more than being wrong, Lily. This is betrayal. This is everything we built, everything we had, thrown away. You made a choice without me. She interrupted me, her voice breaking. I didn't want to hurt you, James. I swear I didn't. But I couldn't keep pretending anymore. I couldn't keep pretending I was happy when I wasn't. I didn't want this to be the end, but it's where we are. I couldn't speak. I couldn't form words. I felt sick. This was my wife, the woman I loved, the mother of my children, telling me that our marriage had meant so little to her that she had to go outside of it for the attention she craved. And somehow, she was still trying to make it my fault. I sat there, numb, as the weight of Lily's words settled over me like a suffocating blanket. My mind was spinning, trying to process the impossible reality of what she had just confessed. She had betrayed me, but she wasn't even sorry, at least not in the way I thought she should be. There was no tearful apology, no pleading for forgiveness, no admission of guilt. Instead, she spoke with the cold clarity of someone who had rationalized everything, as though her actions made sense in some twisted way. I felt a surge of anger, but it was muted by something deeper, something I hadn't expected. It was a strange sensation, a calm that rose within me like an unexpected tide. The anger was there, simmering just beneath the surface, but it was no longer consuming me. Instead, I felt in control. For the first time in months, maybe years, I felt a sense of power that I hadn't known I had. Lily's voice seemed far away as I processed the situation. She was still speaking, still explaining, still justifying her affair like it was an inconvenience we could work through. But I didn't hear her anymore. What mattered now was how I was going to respond. What mattered was that I wasn't the weak, uncertain man I had been when we first started this conversation. The man who had feared losing her. The man who had wondered where he went wrong. I realized something in that moment. I had been letting her hold all the power, all the control, in our relationship. But not anymore. I had always been the one who sought her approval, the one who tried to make things work, the one who tried to be the good husband. I had allowed her to shape my decisions, to dictate the terms of our relationship. I had sacrificed parts of myself just to keep things afloat, to maintain the illusion of a perfect marriage. I had accepted her excuses, tolerated her absences, and even overlooked the subtle changes in her behavior, because I didn't want to face the truth. But now the truth was in front of me, in full, brutal force. And the person who had been so afraid of losing her, of losing our life together, was gone. I was a different man now. I wasn't just the victim in this story. For a moment, the silence between us felt suffocating. I could hear the sound of my breath, shallow and uneven, as I considered my next move. It was as if the years of doubts and self-blame had lifted, replaced by something clearer, something stronger. I was no longer paralyzed by fear. I didn't have to beg her to come back to me or explain myself. I didn't need her to reassure me that I was worthy or enough. I realized now that my worth wasn't tied to her. And I didn't need her permission to live my life. I stood up abruptly, breaking the silence that had thickened between us. My legs felt steady beneath me, the weight of the situation no longer making me waver. I could see the surprise in Lily's eyes as she watched me. She had expected me to crumble, to beg, to plead. But I wasn't that man anymore. I wasn't the man who would let her continue to control this narrative. I wasn't the man who would continue to accept betrayal because I feared being alone or facing the truth. I wasn't going to let her dictate how this story ended. "I'm done," I said, my voice steady but firm. I hadn't realized how powerful those two words could feel, how much weight they carried until they were out in the open. Lily's face softened, her eyes searching mine as though she was trying to gauge my next move. "James, please, don't do this. Let's work through this, we can—" "No," I cut her off, taking a step back. "You don't get to make that decision anymore. I've been living in your shadow for too long, trying to make sense of your choices, your justifications. But this is my life, Lily. My decisions, my path." She blinked, the confusion flashing across her face. It was as though she was seeing me for the first time, and that look, that shift in her expression, made something inside me click. I wasn't the weak man who had stood by, hoping she would change. I wasn't the man who had begged for her love and attention. I wasn't the one who had silently resented the space she had built between us. No, I had something she hadn't expected. I had power now. Power over my own life, over my own future. And with that power came the clarity to make the decisions that would shape the course of my life from here on out. I looked at her, really looked at her for the first time in a long time. This woman, who I had once loved so deeply, had become a stranger to me. A stranger who had betrayed me. And as much as it pained me to admit it, I realized that she wasn't the person I needed to fight for anymore. I had been fighting for her, for our relationship, for a version of her that no longer existed. The truth was that I was fighting for an ideal, not the woman sitting across from me. And that ideal had shattered the moment she had made that choice. "I'm not going to fight for something that's already broken," I said softly. "You made your choice, Lily. And now I'm making mine." She opened her mouth to respond, but I could already see the look in her eyes, the realization that I wasn't going to back down, that the balance had shifted. I wasn't asking her to stay or leave. I wasn't asking for anything. I was taking control of my life. She had made her choice, and now I was making mine. I turned away from her, walking toward the door. The finality of it hit me with a kind of force I hadn't anticipated. There was no turning back now. I had stepped into a new chapter of my life, one where I was no longer a passive participant. One where I was the one calling the shots, deciding my own fate, and no longer allowing anyone, least of all Lily, to dictate who I was or what I would become. I didn't need her to love me to feel whole. I didn't need her to validate my worth. I had found something stronger in myself than I had ever known before, the power to let go. And I knew, with terrifying certainty, that my life was about to change in ways I couldn't yet fully understand. But for the first time in a long time, I was no longer afraid. I was free. As I walked out of the door, I knew that whatever happened next, I had made the right decision. The power, the control, was now mine. I had left Lily standing in the living room, stunned, her words trailing after me like a faint echo, but I didn't look back. I couldn't. Something inside me had snapped, and for the first time in a long time, I wasn't concerned about her feelings or her desires. I didn't care about the apology she might have offered or the justifications she could have continued making. My life, my future, was mine to decide now. I stepped into the cool night air, feeling the weight of the decision I had just made pressing down on me, but for the first time, I felt lighter. I wasn't sure what the next step would be. I wasn't sure where I would go or what I would do next. But I knew one thing. I wasn't going to waste another second of my life in a relationship that no longer worked. I couldn't keep pretending, couldn't keep fighting for something that had already died. I wasn't even halfway down the street when I heard the sound of footsteps behind me. They were light, purposeful, and as I turned, I saw her. Sophia. She was standing at the end of the driveway, her figure illuminated by the streetlights. Her eyes met mine, and for a moment, there was no need for words. I had known Sophia for years, but lately, She had become more of a presence in my life, someone I had spoken to more frequently than I ever had before. She was Lily's best friend. I had never thought of her that way, though not until now. She was strong, independent, and intelligent, everything Lily had once been in our relationship, but now she was offering me something different. Something that was both comforting and dangerous. She was standing there in front of me, her gaze unwavering, as though she had been waiting for this moment, waiting for me to realize that there was someone else who cared about me in a way Lily no longer did. I swallowed hard, my heart still racing from the confrontation with Lily. "Sophia, what are you doing here?" She didn't answer right away. Instead, she stepped closer to me, her presence enveloping me like a magnet pulling me toward her. I could feel the electricity between us, the undeniable tension that had always been there, lurking beneath the surface. And I realized, with a mix of shock and clarity, that the tension had always been mutual. I had always respected Sophia, admired her even, but it had never crossed my mind that she might feel the same way. At least, not until now. She smiled, a soft, knowing smile. "I saw you walk out," she said. "I figured you needed some space, but I couldn't just let you go without saying something." I took a step back, trying to process her words, but it was hard to think with her so close. "Sophia, I didn't ask for any of this." "I know," she said, her voice soft. "But you deserve better than this. You deserve someone who sees you, James. Someone who values you. I'm not going to pretend that I know all the answers, but I know that what you had with Lily isn't what you need anymore. You've been holding on to something that wasn't real for a long time." Her words struck me like a slap to the face, but it was a slap I needed. She was right. I had been clinging to a dream, to a vision of our life together that had been shattered the moment Lily chose someone else. I hadn't wanted to admit it, but I was living in the past. I was holding on to the ghost of something that wasn't real anymore. Before I could say anything, Sophia reached out and gently cupped my face in her hand, her touch both familiar and unfamiliar. The warmth of her hand on my skin sent a shock through me. I had never thought of her this way, at least not consciously, but now, standing in front of her, I couldn't ignore the way my body responded to her proximity. "James, you don't owe anyone anything," she whispered. "Not Lily, not anyone. You have the right to choose for yourself. And if you want something different, something real, then you need to stop apologizing for it." I felt my breath catch in my throat. My mind was racing, but in that moment, I realized she wasn't just talking about Lily. She was talking about me, about how I had been apologizing for my own desires, for my own need to be loved and valued. I had been holding back, afraid of what my choices might cost me. But now, something inside me shifted. Something broke free. I looked at her, truly looked at her for the first time. The vulnerability in her eyes mirrored my own. We were both standing on the edge of something, but neither of us seemed afraid. For the first time in ages, I felt seen, like I wasn't alone in my confusion, my hurt, or my need for something more. "Sophia," I murmured, my voice hoarse. "I don't even know what this is. What we're doing. I've just come from—" "I know," she said, cutting me off, her eyes intense. "You don't have to explain anything to me. But don't you see? This is your moment. You've been pushed to the edge, James. You've been given the chance to take control of your life, to make the decision that's right for you." Her words hit me like a wave, and for the first time, I realized I didn't need to keep living in the shadows of my past. I didn't need to keep living in the wreckage of what had once been. I was free, and I had the power to decide what happened next. Without thinking, I reached for her. It wasn't a conscious decision, but the impulse to close the space between us, to feel the warmth of her touch, to step away from the painful memories of Lily, was overwhelming. Sophia didn't pull away. Instead, she stepped into me, her lips finding mine in a kiss that was both electric and grounding. The world seemed to stop for a moment. It wasn't a kiss born from anger or revenge. It was a kiss born from a deep understanding, a shared moment of clarity. It was a kiss that told me, without words, that I was no longer the man I had been. I wasn't the man who had silently accepted betrayal. I was the man who was choosing to reclaim his life, his power, and his future. As we pulled away, breathless, I looked at her, feeling something shift inside me. I didn't need to say anything. She knew. She knew that, in that moment, I had chosen her. For the first time in a long time, I felt a sense of peace. The decision had been made. My future was mine to control, and for the first time in a long time, I was no longer afraid. I didn't expect the phone call. In fact, after everything that had happened, I wasn't sure what I expected, but I definitely didn't expect her voice again. But there it was, late that night, the sound of Lily's name flashing across my phone. For a moment, I hesitated. I had already made my decision. I had already moved on, stepped away from the broken fragments of a life that no longer held meaning. I wasn't interested in another confrontation, another round of her justifications. But something inside me knew it wasn't over, not for her. I answered. James. Her voice cracked, shaky, but still unmistakable. There was a hint of desperation beneath the facade of calm she tried to maintain. We need to talk. I didn't answer right away, my mind swirling with the memories of our last conversation. The way she had tried to explain away her betrayal, as if I owed her understanding instead of accountability. I could still feel the sting of her words, the sting of her coldness, and the weight of the decisions I had made. Lily, I said, my voice calm but firm. We've already talked? I don't care, she snapped. You can't just walk away from everything we've built. You think this is what you want? You think this is going to make everything better? This is not the answer, James. I could feel the anger rising in her words, but I wasn't swayed. What is the answer, then? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. What is it that you think I'm missing, Lily? She was silent for a long time, and in the quiet, I could hear her breathing, shallow and uneven. Finally, she spoke again, her words quieter now, but no less intense. You think this is about revenge, don't you? That this is about hurting me the way I hurt you. But you're wrong. You're just using me as an excuse to make yourself feel better. This is just about payback, James. This is just you getting back at me for what I did. I let out a slow, steady breath. This isn't about revenge, Lily, I replied, my voice still calm, but now there was a sharpness to it. This is about the truth. The truth that you've been hiding from, the truth that I've been hiding from. I don't need to hurt you, because I've already been hurt. I don't need to get back at you, because you've already shown me who you really are. I just need to accept that. Lily scoffed. The truth? You're full of shit, James. You don't want the truth. You want to feel justified in your decisions. You want to feel like you have the moral high ground, like you've done nothing wrong, like you've been the good guy all along. But that's not what's happening here. You think you can just erase everything, just move on like it never mattered, but it does matter. It always has. I felt a tightness in my chest, but I didn't let her words shake me. I could feel her anger, but beneath it, there was something else. Fear. The fear of losing control. She had always been the one in charge of our relationship, always the one who dictated the terms, who decided the rules. And now, she was realizing that the balance had shifted. That I wasn't just a passive participant in this marriage anymore. I had finally taken control of my life. You can keep trying to make this about me, Lily, I said, my voice steady, unwavering. But it's not about revenge, and it's not about who's right or wrong. It's about truth. The truth that you've been lying to yourself, and to me, for months. The truth that this relationship was never really about us. It was about what you wanted, what you needed, and what you were willing to take, regardless of the cost to me. The truth that we've been living in a house of lies for far too long. I could hear her breathing harder now, and I knew she was trying to hold herself together, trying to regain the control she had lost. But I wasn't going to give her that. I wasn't going to let her manipulate the narrative anymore. I'm not here to punish you, Lily, I continued, each word measured and deliberate. I'm not here to tear you down. What you did, what we both allowed to happen, that's on us. But the truth is, you've already made your choices. And I've made mine. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. I could hear the sound of her swallowing, her voice shaky when she spoke again. You think this is easy for me? You think I haven't been struggling with this? I never wanted it to end this way. I never wanted to hurt you. But I needed something more. I thought I could have both, have you and him, and still be happy. I was wrong. But now you're just abandoning me. You're leaving me with nothing. It was the first time I had heard her admit that she was struggling, that she was suffering in some way. But even as she said the words, I didn't feel sorry for her. I didn't feel sympathy. She was trying to pull me back in with guilt, trying to manipulate me into thinking that I was the cause of her pain. But I wasn't. Lily, I said, my voice quiet, but firm. You don't get to make me feel guilty anymore. I'm not the one who betrayed us. I'm not the one who threw everything away. That was you. You did that. And I've accepted that. But you need to accept it too. You need to accept that we're done, because you can't keep dragging me through this. She let out a bitter laugh. So that's it? You just walk away? No fight, no second chance? You really think you've moved on just like that? You think Sophia is going to fix everything? I felt a twinge of something inside me, maybe regret, maybe confusion, but I pushed it aside. I don't know what Sophia and I have yet, Lily. But what I do know is that I'm done pretending with you. I'm done letting you have the power to destroy me. I'm done letting you control this narrative. There was silence again, but this time it felt different. It wasn't the silence of someone unsure, someone too afraid to make the next move. It was the silence of someone who had finally seen the truth and wasn't backing down from it. I heard Lily take a shaky breath, but there was something else behind it now. Something final. Fine, James. If that's what you want. If you're really done, then go. But don't expect me to be here when you realize what you've lost. I already know what I've lost, Lily, I replied softly. But I also know what I've gained. And that's enough. The line went dead, and I sat there for a moment, staring at the screen. I wasn't sure if I had just ended something or if she had. But in that moment, I realized I had nothing left to prove. The truth was out. It was done. And now, for the first time in a long time, I could finally move forward. The next day, I didn't hear from Lily. For hours, the silence stretched between us like an unspoken agreement that the air had already been cleared, that nothing left to say could change what had already been broken. But then, around midday, she called again. This time, there was no anger, no defensiveness in her voice. It was just exhaustion. It was the sound of someone who had finally run out of ways to justify their actions, someone who was finally ready to face what had been looming between us for months. James, she said quietly, can we meet? I knew what this was. I didn't need her to explain. The phone call, the quiet request, it wasn't for reconciliation. It wasn't for some dramatic plea to fix things. It was just finality. Where? I asked, my voice flat. The park, she answered. The one we used to walk through after dinner sometimes. I remembered those walks well, the ones we used to take when we thought everything would be okay, when we thought we were happy. I remembered how we used to hold hands, how everything seemed so simple, so secure. I wondered if Lily remembered that too, or if those moments had already slipped away for her, faded into a past she no longer cared about. When I arrived at the park, I saw her sitting on one of the benches near the fountain. She looked different, smaller somehow, her shoulders hunched as though the weight of everything we'd been through had finally crushed her. It was strange to see her like this, vulnerable, almost broken. The Lily I had known would never have looked so defeated. I walked over slowly, but I didn't sit next to her. I stood a few feet away, watching her. She looked up at me, her eyes red from what I assumed were tears, though she didn't seem to be crying anymore. But I didn't want it to end like this, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I know, I said. Neither did I. But here we are. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The sound of the wind rustling through the trees seemed to fill the space between us. There was no anger now, no blame. Just the heavy weight of truth settling in, the undeniable fact that what we thought we had, was gone. Lily took a deep breath, and I could see the struggle on her face, the pain of admitting it out loud. I know I've hurt you, James. I never meant to. But I also know that I can't keep pretending. I can't keep lying to myself. This relationship is broken. It has been for a while. I nodded, the words I'd been too afraid to say out loud finally coming to the surface. I know. I've been pretending too, haven't I? Pretending that it could still be fixed, that we could go back to what we were. But we can't. We both know that now. She wiped her eyes, the last remnants of tears still clinging to her lashes. I'm sorry. I really am, James. I wish I could change it. I wish I hadn't hurt you this way. I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of her apology, but not letting it pull me back into the cycle of doubt. I don't need your apology, Lily, I said, my voice steady. I just need the truth. And we both know it's over. She looked at me for a long time, her face a mixture of sadness and resignation. Then, finally, she nodded. Yeah, it is. For a long while, neither of us moved. The park felt too quiet, too still, as though the world had stopped for a moment, giving us this brief, final space to accept what was happening. I don't want to hate you, James, Lily said softly. I really don't. I don't want to be angry at you for leaving. I just need to let go. I've been holding on to something that isn't there anymore. I know, I whispered. I've been holding on to it too. For the first time in a long time, there was no anger, no bitterness in my chest. There was only this quiet acceptance. I had finally let go, just like she had. I turned to walk away, but before I left, I glanced back at her one last time. She was staring at the ground, her hands folded in her lap, lost in her own thoughts. Goodbye, Lily, I said, my voice calm but firm. Goodbye, James, she whispered. I didn't look back again as I walked away. This was the end. The end of the relationship I had fought so hard to keep, the end of the life I thought I would have. And yet, as I stepped out of the park and into the world beyond it, I didn't feel like I was leaving behind something broken. I felt like I was finally moving forward, stepping into a new chapter, one where I was free from the weight of the past. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I could breathe again.
Bye.